June 6, 1944. Along the coast of Normandy, thousands of German soldiers are waiting for an invasion that, according to their own commanders, will probably never come. The sea is rough. The wind is strong. German forecasters are certain that no Allied commander would push 250,000 men across the Channel in weather like this. Then, shortly after midnight, hundreds of aircraft appear above France. Paratroopers drop into the darkness. Warships open fire. Thousands of landing craft come up over the horizon. In our timeline, that morning was the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. In this one, the Germans are ready. Within 5 days, the largest invasion in history becomes the worst defeat the Allies ever suffered. To understand how, you have to understand how thin the German defense really was. The Atlantic Wall from the propaganda films did not exist. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had inspected it himself. Many bunkers were unfinished. Whole divisions were older men and wounded veterans. The best troops were 1,000 miles east, fighting the Soviet Union. Rommel drew one conclusion. The invasion had to be stopped on the sand, in the first hours. Once the Allies had a secure foothold ashore, nothing would ever push them off it. But he could not get the tanks. Germany's armored divisions were scattered across France, and the German leader had reserved the decision to move them for himself. No general below him could release a single panzer. Then came the weather. Early June brought a storm into the Channel, and German meteorologists reported that a landing was impossible. The German command relaxed. Senior officers left for a war game inland. Rommel drove home to Germany for his wife's birthday. The man who believed everything would be decided in the first hours was not in France when the first hours came. That is our timeline. The commander was away, the tanks stood still, and the Allies got ashore. So change one thing, not the weather, not the landings, not the numbers. June 4, 1944. Rommel does not drive to Germany. He goes to see a certain Austrian painter with a mustache and makes the argument of his life. Give the local commanders the tanks or lose France in a day. And this time, the painter listens. He signs an order releasing the armored reserve to local command the moment enemy ships or paratroopers are detected on the coast. It is a very small change. No new divisions, no secret weapon, just permission granted in advance to generals already standing where they need to be. Rommel cancels his leave and stays at his post. Shortly after midnight, American and British paratroopers come down behind the German lines. The wind scatters them badly, exactly as it did in our history. Men land miles from their targets. Some drown in flooded fields. But this time, the Germans work out what is happening far sooner. Searchlights come on. Patrols move onto every road and crossroads before the paratroopers can gather. Their whole job was to delay the German reaction. Instead, they are hunted through the hedgerows in the dark, and the German tanks are already rolling toward the sea. At first light, the Allied fleet begins to bombard the coast. Thousands of shells come down, but most of the bombs fall too far inland. The strongest bunkers are untouched, and the men inside them are waiting. At 6:30 in the morning, the first American landing craft reach Omaha Beach. The ramps drop. The machine guns start immediately. Within minutes, the waterline is covered with the dead and the wounded. The tanks meant to support the infantry sink in the swell. Officers are hit before they can give an order. In our timeline, small groups of Americans eventually clawed their way up the bluffs and broke the line. Here, they never get that far. By midday, thousands are pinned on a few hundred meters of sand. Then the panzers arrive. The 21st Panzer Division reaches the ground between Keene and the sea hours earlier than it did in our history. Behind it come the 12th SS and the Panzerlehr Division. The Allies have almost nothing heavy ashore to meet them. Their tanks are still on ships. Their artillery is scattered. Their radios barely work. At Sword Beach, German armor breaks clean through between the British formations, reaches the waterline, and fires directly into the landing craft as they come in. By nightfall on the first day, there is no secure bridgehead anywhere. Omaha is all but lost. The invasion has not failed yet, but time has changed sides. On June 7, the weather turns again. Landing craft can barely work. The men in France need ammunition, fuel, food, and medicine, and most of it never reaches them. Then on June 8, a full storm comes down the channel. The Mulberry harbors, the artificial ports the whole invasion was built around, are torn apart before they are finished. Ships collide. Floating roadways break loose and go under. The Allied supply system does not slow down. It stops. And that is the moment the Germans choose for their biggest counterattack. On June 9, Eisenhower meets his commanders. By then, there may be nothing left to relieve. Eisenhower gives the order to evacuate. It becomes a second Dunkirk, without the wide beaches and without the time to prepare. Men abandon tanks, trucks and guns at the waterline. The wounded who cannot be carried are left at field hospitals with a doctor and a white flag. Thousands try to swim out to the ships. By June 11, it is over. More than 70,000 Allied soldiers are dead or in German hands. Berlin tells the world it has saved Europe. What it has bought is a few more months. And he has bought them from the wrong people. Churchill survives a vote of confidence, but his authority never recovers. Washington concludes that a second invasion cannot be attempted before the spring of 1945. Then, in December 1944, Roosevelt dies of a stroke. Harry Truman inherits a divided country and one piece of advice from every general he asks. A second attempt will be bloodier than the first. Truman chooses caution. Japan first. Germany can wait, which leaves exactly one army still fighting the Germans in Europe, and it is not coming from the West. The Red Army has already lost millions of men and watched its cities burn. Stalin does not simply want Germany beaten. He wants Germany put somewhere it can never come east again, because the Red Army had never waited. Back in the summer of 1944, while the Allies were still counting their dead, the Soviets launched Operation Bagration and destroyed the German army group holding Belarus. The German leader pulls divisions out of France to plug the gap and forbids every retreat. By January 1945, Soviet troops are on the Oder. But without a second front in the West, the war grinds on. The battle for Berlin begins not in April, but in August. The city is held by veterans, SS units, policemen and boys from the party youth brigades. It is taken street by street over 5 weeks. On September 3, 1945, the man who started all of it shoots himself in the bunker. Germany still does not surrender. A new government escapes to Hamburg and offers Britain and America a deal. Surrender in the West so that German troops can keep fighting in the East. Stalin calls it exactly what it is and orders the Red Army to keep moving. Hamburg falls on September 18. The Soviet advance does not stop at the German border. The Netherlands has been starving a year longer than it did in our timeline. Dutch families have spent 5 years expecting British, Canadian, or American soldiers. Those soldiers never come. On October 7, 1945, Soviet tanks cross the eastern border of the Netherlands instead. Amsterdam falls on October 14. Red flags go up beside Dutch ones along the canals. The first Soviet soldiers are welcomed as liberators because that is what they are. Then the tone changes. Government buildings are occupied. Resistance groups are ordered to hand in their weapons. Queen Wilhelmina, waiting in London to come home, is told that her safety cannot be guaranteed. The royal family sails for Canada instead. The Netherlands has been liberated from Germany. It is not free. Brussels falls in November 1945. France is already coming apart. De Gaulle returns to the south with few troops, while French communist resistance groups, armed and popular, hold Paris and the industrial north. In December, Soviet tanks enter Paris. Stalin announces they have come to clear out the last German units. They do not leave. The same thing happens in Italy, and the Italian government retreats to Sicily. By the start of 1946, the Soviet Union controls almost all of continental Europe. Only Spain, Portugal, southern Italy, and a strip of southern France stay outside. Britain is an island 70 miles from a hostile continent. In March 1946, a provisional government is formed in The Hague. Communists and socialists on paper, Soviet advisors in practice. Companies are nationalized. Critical newspapers are closed. The monarchy is abolished. On May 1, 1947, the Dutch People's Republic is declared. Rotterdam's port is rebuilt as the Soviet Union's main naval base on the North Sea. Dutch children learn Russian at school. People who argue disappear into prisons or into camps much further east. Tens of thousands try to reach England in fishing boats. In our history, the Iron Curtain ran through Germany. In this one, it runs along the beaches of Western Europe. Soviet garrisons sit in Rotterdam, Antwerp, Calais, and Brest. Bunkers, radar masts, and missile sites go up along the English coast. London sits 100 miles from communist-held France and becomes what West Berlin was in our timeline, a city that exists to prove a point. In 1948, America builds a new alliance around Britain, Canada, Spain, and Ireland. But industrial Europe is on the other side. The steel of the Ruhr, the ports of the Netherlands, the factories of France, the oil of Romania. Stalin now has the resources to build a superpower far larger than the one he had in our timeline. He dies in 1953, and for a few weeks, Europe hopes. In Rotterdam, dock workers strike. Students occupy the universities. Old Dutch flags come out of cupboards. Then the tanks enter Rotterdam. On June 19, soldiers fire into a crowd. Hundreds are killed, and nobody intervenes, because intervening means nuclear war. In 1962, an American reconnaissance flight photographs Soviet missile sites near Calais and the Dutch coast. From there, a warhead reaches London in 5 minutes. Children are evacuated. Shelters open in Amsterdam. For 13 days, the world waits. Then a quiet deal is done. The Soviets take their missiles out of Calais and the Netherlands. The Americans withdraw theirs from Spain and promise never to support an invasion of France. The world does not end. Europe stays divided. By the 1970s, the Soviet Empire in Europe is enormous and almost impossible to run. From Amsterdam to Naples, it holds a dozen languages and a dozen political traditions, none of which volunteered. And the border leaks in the one direction that matters. Radio Orange broadcasts from London again, exactly as it did under the Germans. News, music, and speeches the government has banned. As oil prices rise and the Soviet economy stalls, the shelves empty. The Soviet Union took Europe with tanks. It is losing it to radio broadcasts and empty shops. In 1989, a new Soviet leader announces reform and says something none of his predecessors ever would. Moscow will no longer send the army to rescue Europe's communist governments. Poland moves first, then Germany. Then, on September 4, hundreds of thousands fill Dam Square in Amsterdam, demanding free elections and the end of the Dutch People's Republic. The government sends police and armored cars into the center of the city, and the police will not fire. Soldiers put their weapons down. The next day, protesters walk into the parliament in The Hague. The government falls. Within weeks, so do Belgium and France. The border along the English Channel simply stops existing after 44 years. In 1990, the Netherlands holds its first free election since before the war and narrowly votes to restore the monarchy. Princess Juliana, now an old woman, flies home from Canada after 50 years. But the country has been changed beyond recognition, decades behind economically. Then, the secret police files are opened, and families find out which neighbors had been informing on them for 40 years. In our timeline, Western Europe was rebuilt after 1945 with American money and grew into the democracies and economies that made the continent rich. In this one, none of that happens. There is no European Union. Germany is not reunified until 1993. France stays split between a formerly communist North and a capitalist South. Britain is a nuclear state shaped by 40 years of expecting invasion. And all of it turns on one signature, 2 days before the landings, releasing tanks that in our world were not allowed to move. The Austrian painter won the beaches of Normandy. The victory bought him 15 months, and it cost him the entire continent. He won D-Day, and by winning it, he handed Europe to Stalin.